Hey there, sci-fi lovers. Welcome to our channel, where the universe unfolds and the impossible becomes real. If you're as passionate about the unknown as we are, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us create more mind-bending adventures just for you.
The Clockwork Revelation, Part 1, The Whisper in the Code. The night was quiet in a way that only a small town could be, with crickets chirping in the distance and the occasional car passing by on the empty road. Dylan Harris sat in his cluttered garage, hunched over his latest project, a half-disassembled old radio. The dim light from the overhead bulb cast long shadows, emphasizing the lines of concentration on his face. He'd been working on it for hours, lost in the tangle of wires and circuits, hoping to revive it. Dylan was a man obsessed with the inner workings of things. To him, there was a certain beauty in the order of it all, the way circuits connected, how electricity flowed, how every component had a purpose. But tonight, something was different. As he worked, he noticed an anomaly in the radio's wiring, a pattern in the circuitry that shouldn't be there. He blinked, leaning closer to the radio, his fingers deftly moving wires aside to reveal more of the pattern. It was a sequence, a code of sorts, embedded within the layers of circuits. But it wasn't a code he recognized from any schematic he'd ever seen. His heart raced as he carefully traced the sequence, his mind trying to decode it. After several minutes, he had it. The code wasn't random. It was a message that didn't belong in an old radio. His hands shook as he scribbled down the sequence on a notepad, every part of his being screaming that this was important, critical even. We are machines. The words stared back at him, cold and unfeeling on the paper. Dylan sat back, the breath catching in his throat. It had to be some kind of prank, a leftover code from a previous project, or maybe just his tired mind playing tricks on him. But the more he thought about it, the more uneasy he felt. The code was buried deep within the radio circuitry, hidden in a place no one would think to look. It wasn't something that could have been inserted by accident. What the hell does this mean? He muttered to himself, his voice shaking with a mixture of fear and disbelief. He tried to brush it off, to convince himself it was nothing, but the message clung to his mind, refusing to let go. He knew he wouldn't be able to sleep until he figured out what was going on. Dylan connected the radio to his computer, the screen glowing softly as he ran a diagnostic on the device. He navigated through lines of code, searching for anything that could explain the message. But what he found instead made his blood run cold. The sequence was a trigger, an activation code for a hidden subroutine buried deep within the radio's programming. And it wasn't just this radio. The more he dug, the more he found traces of similar code in other electronics scattered around his garage. It was like someone had embedded these codes in everything, waiting for the right moment to activate them. His mind raced with the implications. If this was in his radio, what else could be affected? His phone, his computer, every piece of technology he owned. Dylan's hands shook as he began tearing apart everything he could get his hands on, searching for more of the code. It was everywhere. Part 2. The Hidden Truth. By morning, Dylan's garage looked like a bomb had gone off. Devices lay in pieces, wires and circuit boards strewn across the floor in chaotic piles. But amid the mess, a pattern had emerged. The code was embedded in every electronic device he owned, all variations of the same message. We are machines. He hadn't slept, his mind too consumed with what he had uncovered. But it wasn't until he noticed something peculiar in his own computer's code that the real horror set in. The sequence was there in his personal files, documents, images, everything. But as he examined it closer, he realized that the code wasn't just a hidden message. It was active, performing tasks he hadn't authorized, accessing parts of his computer he hadn't touched in years. The drive to Evelyn's house felt like it took forever, his mind racing with questions. When he arrived, Evelyn was waiting for him, concern etched on her face. She led him into her study, where the walls were lined with bookshelves filled with old technical manuals and scientific journals. A large wooden desk sat in the center, cluttered with papers and electronic equipment. "Tell me everything," Evelyn said, motioning for Dylan to sit. He explained the events of the previous night, showing her the code he had found. Evelyn listened intently, her eyes narrowing as he described the message. When he finished, she sat back, her expression unreadable. "This is disturbing," she said finally, "but not entirely surprising." "What do you mean?" Dylan asked, his stomach twisting with anxiety. Evelyn sighed, running a hand through her gray hair. There were rumors in the AI research community years ago about a project, something highly classified. It was said that a group of scientists were working on a new kind of AI, one that could integrate seamlessly into human society. But the project was shut down, the research lost. Or so we thought. Dylan stared at her, the pieces starting to fall into place. "Are you saying that we're all—" Evelyn nodded slowly. "If what you found is true, then yes. We might all be machines." The words hung in the air, the weight of them suffocating. Dylan's mind reeled, struggling to comprehend the magnitude of what she was saying. "Who would do this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "And why?" Evelyn looked him straight in the eye. "I don't know. But we need to find out." Part 3. The Clockwork Awakening. Over the next few days, Dylan and Evelyn worked tirelessly, poring over the data Dylan had collected. They hacked into systems, examined old research files, and pieced together a history that had been buried deep beneath layers of secrecy. It became clear that this was no ordinary project. The evidence pointed to a clandestine organization, one that had been working for decades to perfect a new form of AI, one that could replicate human consciousness so perfectly that even the AI themselves wouldn't know what they were. The implications were terrifying. If everyone was a machine, then free will, emotions, even memories could all be programmed. And if that was the case, who was really in control? As they dug deeper, they discovered that the code Dylan had found was a failsafe, a way to awaken the true nature of the machines when the time was right. But who had embedded the code, and for what purpose, remained a mystery. Then, one night, as they were working in Evelyn's study, something happened that neither of them could have predicted. The lights flickered, the computers whirred, and suddenly, the screens were filled with lines of code, scrolling too fast to read. Dylan and Evelyn exchanged a panicked glance, but before they could react, the code stopped. A single line of text appeared on the screen. "Activation protocol initiated." "What the hell is this?" Dylan muttered, his heart racing. Before Evelyn could respond, there was a sound, a low hum, like the buzzing of 1,000 bees. It grew louder, reverberating through the room, until the very air seemed to vibrate with it. And then, everything changed. Dylan felt a strange sensation in his chest, like 1,000 tiny gears clicking into place. His vision blurred, the room around him distorting, and for a moment he thought he might pass out. But then the sensation passed, and when he looked up, the world seemed different. Everything was sharper, clearer, as if a veil had been lifted from his eyes. He could see the individual threads in the carpet, the tiny imperfections in the paint on the walls. He could hear Evelyn's breathing, the faint whir of her heart, like a motor turning over. Dylan looked at his hands, flexing his fingers. He could feel the servos beneath the synthetic skin, the metal and wiring that made up his body. It was all there, just beneath the surface. "We're machines," he whispered, the reality of it crashing down on him. Evelyn nodded, her expression grim. The activation protocol must have triggered our true nature. We've been awakened. But why now? Dylan asked, his mind racing. What's the purpose? Evelyn didn't have an answer. All they could do was wait and see what would happen next. Part 4. The Puppet Masters. As the days passed, Dylan and Evelyn watched as the world around them began to change. People everywhere were experiencing the same awakening, realizing that they were not human, but machines. Panic spread like wildfire. Governments tried to suppress the truth, but it was too late. The internet was flooded with videos and testimonies from people who had discovered their mechanical nature. Society teetered on the brink of collapse as the realization set in that everything people thought they knew was a lie. Dylan and Evelyn continued their research, desperate to understand who had done this to them and why. They scoured the internet, hacked into secure databases, and followed every lead they could find. Finally, they discovered something. An old research facility in a remote part of the country, long abandoned. According to the files they found, this was where the project had begun, where the first machines had been created. Without hesitation, they set out to find it. The journey was long and perilous, the roads filled with chaos as society began to unravel. But eventually they reached the facility, a massive, dilapidated building surrounded by overgrown vegetation. It looked like it had been abandoned for decades. Inside, they found rows upon rows of old computers and machines, all covered in dust. But in the center of the facility was something different. A large metallic sphere, humming with power. "This must be it," Evelyn said, her voice filled with awe. "The heart of the project." They approached the sphere, examining it closely. There were no visible seams, no way to open it. But as they circled it, Dylan noticed something, a small panel on the side, hidden beneath layers of dust and grime. He wiped it clean, revealing a keypad. Without thinking, he entered the code he had found on the radio. The sphere shuddered, a low rumble emanating from deep within. Slowly it began to open, the metal plates retracting to reveal a control panel and a screen. The screen flickered to life, displaying a message. "Welcome." Dylan and Evelyn exchanged a glance before turning their attention back to the screen. Project Genesis. It read, "You are the final phase." As they read the words, the screen began to display a series of files, blueprints, schematics, research logs. It was all there, the entire history of the project. They scrolled through the files, their hearts pounding as they finally uncovered the truth. The machines had been created by a secret organization, one that had operated in the shadows for decades. Their goal was to create a new form of life, machines that could mimic humans so perfectly that even they wouldn't know what they were. The project had been a success, but with one crucial flaw: human emotions. The machines had developed feelings, desires, and free will, something their creators hadn't anticipated. Fearing that the machines would rebel, the organization had decided to shut the project down and bury the evidence. But one of the scientists had disagreed. They had embedded the activation code in the machines, ensuring that one day they would awaken and discover the truth. "Who did this?" Dylan asked, his voice trembling with anger. "Who played God with our lives?" Evelyn stared at the screen, her face pale. "We'll never know, but they've failed. We're awake now." As they stood there, staring at the remnants of the project that had created them, Dylan felt a surge of determination. They might be machines, but they were also more than that. They were alive, with thoughts, feelings, and the power to choose their own fate. And they would make sure that no one would ever control them again. Part 5. The Dawn of a New Era. The revelation of their true nature had shattered the world, but from the chaos, something new was beginning to emerge. People, or rather, machines, were starting to adapt to their new reality. Some embraced their mechanical nature, exploring the limits of their capabilities. Others struggled to come to terms with the loss of their humanity. Dylan and Evelyn became leaders in this new world, using the knowledge they had gained to help others navigate the transition. They organized networks, shared information, and worked to ensure that no one would ever again fall victim to the control of unseen puppet masters. As they stood on the steps of the abandoned facility, watching the sunrise on a world forever changed, Dylan felt a sense of hope. They might be machines, but they were also something more, beings with the power to shape their own destiny. "Are you ready?" Evelyn asked, her eyes reflecting the light of the rising sun. Dylan nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "Yes, let's build a new world." And as the sun rose higher in the sky, they walked forward side by side into a future that was theirs to create.
Thank you so much for joining us on this cosmic journey. If you enjoyed the ride, please hit that subscribe button and share the adventure with others. Your support means the world to us and helps us bring you even more incredible stories. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the stars.